I'm Heather Schneider, your service leader, joined by Madeline Harts on piano, AV specialist Jeremy Yoinchik, and we are pleased to welcome back Reverend Peter House, who will talk with us about whether cultivating an awareness of death may deepen our spirituality and help us live richer lives. Welcome to all members, friends, and visitors to the Unitarian Universalist Church of East Aurora. The UUEA strives to be a community in which all people are welcomed, regardless of belief systems, ethnicities, race, gender, sexual orientation, or economic standing. Welcome to a safe place. Before we begin, are there any announcements this morning? I begin this service by acknowledging that our nation was largely built on the ancestral land of Native nations, in the stolen labor of enslaved peoples. May we persevere to achieve a clear understanding of our shared past and utilize these lessons learned for good and for progress. Madeline will now perform Sunrise by Dario Marinelli. Please join me as I light the chalice lighting, which is printed on the order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and celebration of the life we share together.
There is real beauty to be found in knowing that your end is going to catch up with you faster than you expected, and that you have to get all your living, laughing, and crying done as soon as you can.
We'd like to remind that people may give online at uuea.org or in person by the plate that is on the bookshelf if someone wants to give on their way out. Madeline will now play Spirit of Life.
So before beginning the sermon, I would just like confirmation that I can be seen and heard.
I
Thank you,
hear
Kevin.
Yep.
And the other thing I want to, before I begin, I want to say how really sorry I am that this ended up not being in person. I was really, really looking forward to coming back and being among all of you in person. And I also think this is a topic that would have been better broached in person, and we could have had some discussions afterwards, but hopefully we'll be able to stick around on Zoom if people want to and talk a little bit about it afterwards. But, and I also, increasingly, it used to always be that you would get sermons that were written for Rochester, but increasingly sermons are written for you, and this is one that was written for you first. So thank you. And I also appreciate that I was given the opportunity not to take that long drive on slippery roads. So I have set a tentative expiration date for myself. I am planning to die in around 2039. That is the year that I will be 76. Now, in today's world, that sounds young. People routinely live into their 80s and 90s these days. I am at my current age of 59 in pretty good shape. At my last physical, my doctor pronounced me in good shape for my age. I have no significant health concerns, and all my blood work was really good. My cholesterol, my blood sugar, my liver and kidney functions, all were good. So, you might be asking, why do I expect to be gone at the relatively young age of 76? Why am I anticipating not living well into my 80s or even my 90s? Well, I kind of came to this conclusion based on family history. I have an amazing number of close relatives who died at the age of 76 or 77. My mother died at 76. My mother's only sibling, my Aunt Jean, died at 76. My maternal grandfather died shortly after turning 77. Now, there were a few anomalies. My maternal grandmother only made it to 73. My father's only sister died at 70. But I had twin great aunts, Aggie and Helen. Aggie died when she was 75, and Helen was, you guessed it, 76. My great uncle Johnny died when he was 76. And even though we weren't related by biology, my other grandfather, the man who raised my father from the time that my father was 4 years old, died when he was 76. My mother's cousin Helen died at age 76, and her cousin Donnie died at 76. So our genes seem to be programmed with an amazing precision for living 76 or 77 years. Now, there are a few outliers. My father's mother did make it to age 81, but there are outliers in the other direction as well. My father's birth father died of tuberculosis when he was 25, and my own father died of a heart attack at 43. Now, these family members all had something else in common other than dying around the age of 76. All of them, without exception, were in remarkably good health and very vigorous until shortly before their deaths. My mother was working until 3 weeks before she died, and my Aunt Jean had a job until just a few months before she died. My great aunts, Aggie and Helen, they were both still working as waitresses and diners on their 75th birthdays. My grandfathers both worked full-time well past their 70th birthdays as well. My one grandfather was still working on a loading dock in a factory at age 74, lifting heavy boxes all day. In every case that I've mentioned, these relatives were all healthy and vigorous right until a month or two before they died, sometimes right up until they died. And they all looked and acted years younger than they were. No one had any hearing or vision issues. No one had any signs of dementia. No one had any mobility issues. In every case, they were struck down suddenly by either strokes or heart attacks or cancer or some other chronic serious condition that went undetected for some reason right up until the end. Now, the effect on our family of these losses was the kind that you experience when a young person in the prime of life is taken way too soon. And this, I think, is due to the vigorous good health that all of them were enjoying right up until the end. So, in my opinion, I do have some justification for expecting to die at around age 76 or thereabouts. Given everything that I have just described, it doesn't seem that unreasonable to me to at least seriously entertain the idea that I won't see my 80th birthday. And it seems to make sense to me to live with an awareness that my retirement won't likely last the 30 years that the New York State teachers' retirement system encourages us to plan for. But I have to say this. As reasonable as this idea seems to me, it upsets or angers nearly everyone I mention it to. I usually get one of the following reactions. Why on earth would you even think such a thing? Or, oh my goodness, you are perfectly healthy. You'll live to be at least 90. Some people will say something along the lines of, well, that's fine for you, but I plan to live to be at least 100, thank you. Or some people well-meaningly will say to me, don't manifest that. If you expect it, it will happen. Now, I have one friend in particular, Phyllis, who gets extremely irritated whenever this subject comes up. I don't know why you want to die so soon, she says. You should be planning for at least 20 years longer than 76. Now, I do understand something about Phyllis. She's 72. And so the idea of expiring at 76, I acknowledge, hits much closer to home at this point for her than it does for me. However, I have gently mentioned that fact to her, and she vehemently denies that she has any fear of dying at all in the relatively near future. Oh, no, she will say, that doesn't worry me at all. In fact, I never think about death at all. Everyone in my family has lived until at least their late 80s, and many of them have made it past 90. I eat healthy and I exercise. I plan to be at least 95 before I even think about dying. Now, let's change the subject, please. Yes, let's change the subject, please. Let's talk about anything but death. Let's not be morbid. And if the subject does happen to inadvertently come up, yes, let's please change the subject as quickly as possible. Without coming right out and saying so in most cases, I know that most of my friends really think there's something wrong with me, that I not only talk readily about death and with relative ease about the topic, but also that I seem not only willing to talk freely about my own death, but that I'm actually willing to speculate that it will likely come in the not really so distant future. I mean, 17 years, when you think about it, is a relatively short period of time. a time span that's easily comprehended and able to be pictured by people over 50, which is the age group with whom I spend most of my time and the age group that I usually have these conversations with. The idea that I openly plan for and even expect to be gone in this relatively comprehensible, I guess, time frame is scary and it's threatening to them. And I think that this is why whenever the topic does come up, it is generally met with irritation or discomfort, followed by immediate assurances that I will defy family history and I will probably be competing in a 5K run when I'm 97. Or it's met with defiant proclamations that they themselves expect to last at least 20 years longer than I do. I promise I'll sing at your funeral, one of my friends who is a good deal older than me quips whenever this subject comes up. Regardless of the tack they take, the commonly held belief seems to be that death is distasteful, an affront to decency, unnatural in the extreme, and an unwelcome intruder. Something to be avoided, denied, and fought against at all costs for as long as possible, no matter what the stakes. It seems that the mere acknowledgement that death awaits all of us is seen as a denial of our very birthright. And to openly plan for the possibility that I will quite likely expire a fair amount of time ahead of the outer limits of what is possible for human beings strikes many people as a complete betrayal of everything that is good and decent. They think something is wrong with me. Death, I think it's safe to assume, is a topic that few, if any of us, enjoy contemplating. We don't enjoy the prospect of it. Living creatures, after all, have a very strong survival instinct. It's necessary in order to thrive. If you think about it, this instinct underlies most of our daily living. It's really kind of in our minds. If you think about it, it's there all the time. It guides the way we drive our cars, our movements, our dietary choices. It's a big part of our financial decisions. It is inherent in our human interactions as we're always assessing on some level who to trust and who not to trust. Am I safe? Am I not safe? It's in the back of our minds when we read the news. Will this situation in Ukraine affect my well-being? Will I feel the impact of inflation? How much danger does COVID pose for me? As living animals, we are, from the womb, hardwired to be this way. The unique dilemma for human beings is that we are, so far as we know anyway, the only living beings that are capable of understanding and anticipating death. And it scares us. It terrifies us. In fact, if we are to be honest, it terrifies most of us to the cores of our very being. And so all of us, myself included, have a tendency to push it away, either by telling ourselves that we'll defy the odds, like some of my friends do, and become centenarians, or as my friend Phyllis does, simply changing the subject to anything else as quickly as possible. Anything but the dreaded topic of death. The belief which underlies all of these reactions is that death is a thoroughly unpleasant and even distasteful phenomenon. Something foreign and unnatural. A fact that at the very best, must be endured when we absolutely are forced to reckon with it, but something which should be ignored or denied or pushed away whenever it's possible. Mark my words, one of my friends has told me, no good comes from dwelling on death. He said that the first time I told him my theory that I thought I would be gone at around age 76. He went on. It's morbid and self-indulgent, and it serves no useful purpose. I should think that you, of all people, would have better things to think about. And he was quite adamant. He was pretty irritated with me. But do I really have better things to think about? Are there really more important things to think about? Am I just being morbid and self-indulgent? Does thinking regularly about death and projecting a likely longevity limit serve no useful purpose at all? Or can living with an abiding sense of death actually deepen our spirituality and help us live richer lives while we are alive? Well, I definitely think so. First and foremost, from a purely pragmatic standpoint, death is the most significant and important event we will ever experience. Indeed, everything else in our lives hinges upon it. So from that standpoint alone, it seems to me that ignoring it or sweeping thoughts of it away whenever they occur is counterproductive to living a really fulfilling life. Because really, when you think about it, many of our worries and fears can be soothed by carefully planning for this inevitable eventuality. I'm sure there are a lot of us here who have done very elaborate and detailed estate plans, and we take some comfort in the fact that we know that our loved ones will be provided for, and those things will happen when we can no longer do them. So just from that standpoint alone, contemplating it at least sometimes can be a source of comfort. And also, let's face it, it is absolutely inevitable. So making peace with it just seems to make a whole lot of sense. Why expend energy dreading or denying something that is so utterly and completely inescapable? But even more important than these pragmatic concerns, I believe that living with an abiding awareness of death and a sense constantly that it awaits us at some point can deeply enrich our spiritual lives and imbue the time that we do have with a sacredness that's difficult to achieve if we don't have an awareness of the limits of time. So think about this. No doubt each and every one of us here this morning has had the experience of traveling to some place that we absolutely love. We're on vacation. It's a brief and special interlude, a departure from our regular daily routines. We understand right from the get-go that our time there is brief and fleeting. And just like my plan to die around the age of 76, we know the expiration date of our vacation. We know exactly how much time we have there. Does knowing that we only have 5 or 10 days in this special place ruin our enjoyment? Or does it enhance our pleasure and our enjoyment of it and our appreciation for it? We don't skip watching the sunset over the ocean when we're only at the beach 4 nights, do we? We don't take it for granted or find an excuse not to watch it or become so absorbed in watching Judge Judy that we let the opportunity just kind of slip past us. Of course not, right? We make time for it because we understand. We know that we only have 5 sunsets to see. And we understand that if we miss one of them, we only have 4 left at the very most. And while I acknowledge this example is perhaps a little bit cliche, I believe that it does illustrate the point rather nicely. Each and every one of us has a finite number of sunsets to watch. And when that number is used up, that's it. Immersed in the busy routines of our daily lives, it's easy to lose sight of this fact. Most of us live lives with a high degree of routine, repeated over and over and over again over very long periods of time. So thoroughly embedded as we are in our familiar routines and patterns, it is easy to lose sight of the fact that it doesn't, in fact, go on forever and ever. There is an expiration date. And that expiration date often is earlier than we think it might be. And it's definitely sooner than most of us feel it will be. So to the extent that we are able, I think that reminding ourselves that each day might be the last day that we ever enjoy a cup of coffee with our spouse, or it may be the last time we ever walk our dog, or it might be the final trip that we ever make to a dear friend's house, is an act of profound appreciation, which elevates these experiences from mundane to sacred. Far from being morbid, as some of my friends have suggested, this simple awareness enriches our appreciation and enhances our experience of it. Routine occurrences can seem even miraculous when they are savored with the knowledge that there isn't, in fact, an endless string of them expanding on ahead of us ad infinitum. Staying in tune with death is also a wonderful way to keep and put things into perspective. We can ask ourselves, how important is this really? My mother had a wonderful way of doing this, and she did it all the time. When I'd be upset about a failed quiz or a ruined sweater or not getting the coveted job that I had interviewed for, she would always ask, in the overall picture of life, how important is this really? Will you be thinking about this on your deathbed? Well, think about it. In almost every single case, the answer will be no, isn't it? Think about the things that we're mostly upset about on a daily basis. Are they things that will really be ultimately that important when viewed in the scheme of things? So much of what we spend our time worrying and fretting about is really of no real consequence when viewed in the grand scheme of things. My friend Gloria said something a few years ago which really got me thinking as well. Gloria is a lifelong hippie radical activist. She has marched and protested and boycotted more than anyone else that I know for racial justice, against income inequality, for LGBTQ rights, for environmental causes, for a just healthcare system. She's marched against the war. She's protested for refugees. Gloria has done it all. There isn't a good cause that she hasn't had skin in the game for, as they say. When she was well over 60, she spent many, many nights at downtown Rochester's Occupy camp, sleeping on the ground, helping to feed people, and standing right up to the police. I'm actually surprised she didn't get arrested. She absolutely never shies away from putting her beliefs into actions. But about a year ago, she surprised me. I'm starting to realize, she said, that I'm only one person and I'm getting old. And it finally dawned on me a while back that I've only got so much energy and so much time to live, and that these problems are not all going to be fixed while I'm alive. But that's okay too, I've realized, she said, because I am only one tiny being in the vastness of time and space. I can't do it all alone, and it can't be accomplished on my time frame. Fixing everything isn't my job. Gloria said that a lot of people were really discouraged when she started to say this. They saw it as capitulation. The radical was finally throwing in the towel. She didn't care anymore. But she assured me that this wasn't the case at all. Instead, what she told me was that this awareness was helping her to narrow and deepen her focus on one or two causes where she really felt passionate and really felt like she could make a difference. It made her see that passing the torch was also a crucial thing. I can offer perspective and wisdom, she said, but younger people must step up and do some of the work. And there's good news in that, she said, because they were raised at a different time with different sensibilities. They have a different perspective and different experiences than I have, ones that are crucially vital and needed. And they have a lot of things to offer that I don't have. And besides, she concluded, we have to balance our anger and our sense of injustice with a measure of inner peace if we want to stay sane and if we want to continue to have anything to offer at all. So she said, the realization that I won't live forever, and maybe I won't even live much longer, to be honest, is helping me to do that. It has definitely helped me, she said, to put my ego in check. We are all finite beings, limited by time. We never know when the end may come for ourselves or for the people we love. I personally have come to see this awareness as a great gift and not as a burden. Rather than experiencing thoughts of death as unwelcome intrusions into my happiness, I actually take comfort in many ways from knowing that it's looming on the horizon. And like Gloria, there are other people to step up and do some of the work. I don't have to do it all myself. And like Gloria too, I feel a sense of relief when I take time to appreciate the fact that I am just but a small dot on the screen of life. And it's not even remotely possible for me to fix everything that is wrong in my lifetime. And rather than making me complacent and inactive, it energizes me to focus on the process rather than the outcome. Knowing and understanding that so many of these struggles will be going on long after I am gone, and that new ones are going to continue to pop up. I'm finally accepting that it isn't my job to fix everything. It is simply my job and my duty to make a contribution. And if you think about it, think about this. Most causes are actually damaged and not enhanced whenever an individual has their ego become too big. When the cause gets linked too closely to the individual, when the person in charge is kind of seen as indispensable. When this happens, the individual loses sight of the work and the cause loses its way. So yes, I have a reputation among my friends for being the one to bring up the topic of death. Now, some of them find it amusing, some of them find it irritating, and I think definitely a few of them find it threatening. And a lot of people, like I said, I think they think something's wrong with me. But maybe I talk about it so much because death has been a constant and strong presence in my life from an early age. When I was 12, my sister was killed in a car accident. And then when I was 13, my father died of a heart attack. When I was 16, my grandfather, who lived nearby and who I saw nearly every day, died suddenly of a stroke. And when I was 18, my grandmother, to whom I was very, very close, died likely by suicide, but as families are, no one really talks about that for sure. But in all four cases, these were very sudden deaths. All four of these people were literally fine 1 minute and then gone the next. So between the ages of 12 and 18, I lost 4 primary family members to sudden death. And while this, yes, does give me a fairly significant trauma history, to be sure, it gave me gifts as well. From a pretty early age, I understood that life was precarious and a precious thing. I learned early on never to take people for granted, and I learned never to assume that I had all the time in the world to do whatever it was I wanted to do. And I never went through that phase that a lot of teenagers do where I thought I was invincible. In many ways, these traumas made me more cautious than I might otherwise have been, to be sure, and I'm sure there's a negative side to that. But these experiences also made me grateful and appreciative in a way that I may not have been otherwise. And this training that I had early on has served me well in my current life as well. Many people know, but that I've talked about, my partner, Michael, has a very serious heart condition, one for which there's currently not any cure. He is at constant risk of sudden death. Now, he does have an implanted pacemaker defibrillator, and he does other things to protect himself and to lower the risk, but it's still a pretty scary condition. In some ways, and we've talked about this a lot, though, it's a gift too. I live in constant awareness that our time together is precious and never, never to be taken for granted. And this awareness, by the way, helps me let go of many of the irritations and conflicts that most of us know are inherent in married life. I can honestly say that I appreciate him every day in a way that I might not if I did not live with an abiding awareness that each day could really be our last day together. And far from being morbid and depressing, I believe that this experience, that this appreciation brings me more joy than sorrow. Many people in the congregation have also met our dog, Ollie. He's attended services and even sung the hymns. As hard as it is for me to believe, Ollie will be 9 years old this July. And in the past year, his face is turning rapidly gray, and he definitely has less energy than he used to. So those gray hairs are a good reminder to me that I need to appreciate and cherish him as much as I possibly can while I can. So my message this morning is obvious and hardly original. Life doesn't last forever. Death awaits us all. After all, I may very well defy the family odds and live to be 85 or even 90. And I could also go much sooner than 76. We just never know. But setting a tentative expiration date for myself has really helped my spiritual life in immeasurable ways. It is a good, solid reminder of all the points that we've covered this morning. By living in awareness of my mortality, I believe, anyway, that I am more appreciative of the gifts that my daily life holds. I am more appreciative of the ones I love. And it helps me keep my ego in check because it keeps me in touch with my relative smallness and relative insignificance in the scheme of things. I encourage each and every one of you to take some time to contemplate this idea for yourselves. And I hope it will not be a morbid or scary experience, but just one that will bring some perspective and some richness to your appreciation of everything that you have and that you do right now. So the most recent death in my family was my mother's cousin, Ruth Ann. She died this past fall. She had lost her husband about a year ago, but she seemed to be doing well. When her daughter spoke to her in the morning, she was fine. She was cleaning her kitchen, and then she had a bunch of errands planned. When she didn't answer the phone at dinner time, her daughter went to her house and found that she had peacefully died in her favorite chair. Ruth Ann had just turned 77.
Please join me in reading the words on your order of service for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Ideally, every human being ought to live each passing moment of his life as if the next moment were going to be his last. He ought to be able to live in the constant expectation of immediate death and to live like this, not morbidly, but serenely. The closer that a human being can come to attaining this ideal state of mind, the better and happier he or she will be. And to this, let us say together, Amen.